They rushed the human to med bay for poison. He was already walking back with coffee. The trade station hung silently in space, a glittering hub where dozens of species moved through corridors, airlocks, and docking bays. Massive observation windows showed the black void, dotted with stars, and the station's lights glinted on the hulls of ships that had traveled from hundreds of systems away. Humans were still a new presence here, and most aliens regarded them with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. They had heard stories of human fragility, how even minor illnesses could incapacitate them. Yet somehow humans always survived. Ethan Cole, a human logistics officer, walked through the busy corridor with a tray of food. He had been assigned to help coordinate shipments of rare minerals, exotic plants, and advanced technology across several sectors. Today, he was meeting with alien delegates from 3 species known for their strict rules and suspicious nature. The corridor smelled faintly of recycled air, spices from alien cuisines, and the subtle tang of metal. Ethan carried the tray carefully, balancing a plate of prepared food and a small glass of a local alien drink. It was meant as a courtesy, a way to make the delegates feel at home. The station's medics had warned him to be cautious, but Ethan was used to walking among alien species. He smiled politely, nodding to a passing security droid that beeped its acknowledgement. He reached the negotiation room, a circular chamber with walls that changed color depending on the speaker. The delegates were already seated, their elongated limbs and colorful skin reflecting in the polished floor. Ethan noticed the nervous looks on some of their faces. Humans were considered fragile, and they had heard of incidents where other species tried to poison or test humans and failed miserably. Ethan placed the tray on a side table and offered the drink. The tallest of the delegates, a blue-skinned being named Larian, tilted his head and studied Ethan with sharp, bright eyes. "Human," Larian said in a voice that sounded like wind through thin reeds. "We are cautious. Your species is weak. Do you consume toxins often?" Ethan smiled. "I guess we do in small amounts. Coffee, tea, some of our foods. Our bodies handle things differently than yours." He poured some of the alien drink into their cups. The delegates watched, whispering among themselves, their gestures and murmurs incomprehensible to most humans. Ethan stayed calm, though he could feel the tension in the room. He took a seat at the table, joining the negotiations, and tried to keep the conversation light. He spoke about trade, routes, and cooperation. The delegates listened, but their attention kept flicking to the tray of food and drink he had provided. Ethan noticed their suspicion but did not let it bother him. He had been trained for situations like this. Humans were adaptable. Humans survived where others failed. Suddenly, a soft alarm sounded. It was almost too quiet for the delegates to hear at first. Ethan's stomach sank as the alarm repeated in short, urgent pulses. The medic's scanners in the room lit up, detecting a compound in his drink. "A lethal neurotoxin," the alert said. Ethan blinked and set his cup down slowly. The delegates froze. Larian's eyes widened. "It is poisoned?" he asked, his voice sharp and incredulous. The other delegates murmured quickly to one another, their colors shifting nervously. Ethan looked down at the tray. The poison had been in the drink they had given him. He had no idea who had done it, but instinctively he remained calm. Humans had faced worse. Before Ethan could react, the station medics rushed in, their movements fast and precise. They had seen humans struggle with toxins before, and they knew the readings were serious. They tried to grab him and guide him toward the med bay. Ethan, still seated, raised his hands to stop them. "Wait," he said calmly. "I'm fine, let's see what's happening." The medics ignored him. They worked quickly, scanning his body with portable devices. "Heart rate rising," one said. "Blood chemistry unstable." "We need to move him immediately," Ethan sighed. He stood slowly, realizing that arguing would waste time. He allowed them to guide him out of the negotiation room. The delegates watched in shock. They had expected a human to collapse, to faint, or worse. Instead, Ethan walked steadily, his posture relaxed. Security officers cleared a path, pushing aside alien staff and onlookers. Ethan passed through the corridors as alarms blared softly, warning everyone nearby. The medics ran beside him, speaking rapidly to one another. Ethan could hear some of their words but didn't respond. He focused on the floor, his breathing steady, his mind calm. Humans had a way of surviving situations like this. It was instinct, training, and evolution. As they approached the med bay, more personnel arrived. Laura Benson, a young human medical aide, ran up to them. "Ethan," she exclaimed, "I told them humans handle poisons differently. Just stand still, let me check you." Ethan nodded slightly, appreciating her calmness. She guided the medics to take a step back, though they were skeptical. Alien medics had rarely trusted a human's own understanding of their body. Ethan allowed Laura to perform quick scans. She moved her devices over his arms, neck, and chest, reading the results on her small handheld screen. "The compound is breaking down naturally," she said quietly. "Humans can metabolize it. It's weak for us." The alien medics exchanged confused glances. They had prepared antidotes, injections, and emergency protocols, all for a human supposedly fragile to toxins. Ethan's body, however, seemed unaffected. Larian and the other delegates arrived at the med bay entrance, watching as humans acted differently than they had expected. Their skin colors changed rapidly, a sign of shock and confusion. One delegate whispered, How can he still stand?" Ethan looked at them and smiled faintly. Humans were underestimated. They had survived deserts, frozen wastes, high radiation, and poisons from plants that would kill most other species. This was just another example. Ethan walked slowly toward a small chair. He sat down and picked up a cup of station coffee that Laura had prepared. He lifted it to his lips and took a small sip, enjoying the warm, bitter taste. The aliens gasped again. Not only was he alive, he was calm enough to drink coffee. Some whispered quickly to one another, trying to understand. Laura smiled, shaking her head. "Humans are strange," she said softly, "but we survive." The medics finally relaxed slightly, realizing the human would not collapse or die. Ethan finished his coffee and set the cup down. He looked at the aliens with quiet amusement. "Don't worry," he said in simple, calm words. "You didn't kill me. Humans are tricky." The delegates exchanged glances. Their earlier fear turned slowly into awe and confusion. They had expected a spectacle of weakness. Instead, they saw confidence, adaptability, and calm strength. The council overseeing the station would later record this incident. It would be used as a lesson. Humans could not be treated like fragile specimens. They were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of surviving what most species could not. Ethan Cole, by simply walking and drinking coffee, had rewritten their perception of humans. And while the aliens debated, questioned, and tried to understand, Ethan simply stood and stretched. He had survived another day, another test, and another attempt to undermine him. Humans were not fragile. Humans were a force of nature, subtle but unstoppable. Today, the medics and delegates would remember it. Ethan would walk back to his duties, coffee in hand, and the galaxy would learn that a human's strength was not always visible, but it was undeniable. As the sun, or the station's artificial light, shifted across the corridor, Ethan passed through the doors toward his next assignment. Behind him, the medics whispered among themselves. The aliens shook their heads in disbelief. And Laura smiled, knowing that humans always found a way to survive, even when everyone thought they could not. The story of the human who survived poison and drank coffee would spread quietly through the station. Crew members, traders, and delegates would tell the tale in hushed voices, not to scare, but to respect. Ethan Cole had done nothing extraordinary by human standards. He had simply lived. But in a galaxy that underestimated humans at every turn, This was nothing short of remarkable. The med bay was buzzing with tension. Alien doctors moved quickly, scanning devices in hand, while humans stood calmly beside Ethan, observing. The walls glowed softly with a sterile light that reflected off the polished floors. Machines beeped and whirred, recording every heartbeat, every chemical change in Ethan's body. Outside the doors, the alien delegates waited nervously, their bright skin colors shifting in patterns that showed confusion and fear. They could not understand how a human could survive a poison that would incapacitate most species instantly. Laura Benson, the young human medical aide, moved confidently through the med bay, adjusting machines and checking monitors. "He's stable," she said quietly to the nearest alien medic. "Really, he's fine. The toxin is already breaking down. Humans can process it differently." The alien medic looked skeptical. He had prepared syringes of antidote, injections of neutralizing compounds, and emergency protocols for minutes like this. He studied Ethan carefully, but the readings on his device matched what Laura said. Still, he hesitated. Alien doctors rarely trusted human explanations about their own biology. Ethan leaned back slightly in the chair, his posture relaxed. He rubbed his arm where the drink had touched his skin and watched the chaos with quiet amusement. He had been in situations like this before. Humans were built to survive dangerous environments, toxins, and situations other species could not handle. It was not arrogance, it was reality. He had learned early that humans needed to adapt quickly, stay calm, and trust their instincts. That trust had kept him alive many times before. "Dr. Senar," Laura said to the alien lead medic, "you're overreacting. The readings are normal for a human. Your compounds will do nothing but stress him." Senar's eyes flickered with doubt. He studied Ethan closely, noting that the human's breathing was even, his pupils normal, and his blood pressure steady. Senar whispered to his assistant, "It cannot be. Our tests are accurate. Humans cannot survive that dose. They must collapse." Ethan overheard them but did not respond. Instead, he sipped slowly from a cup of water Laura had brought him. His eyes scanned the room. The alien medics were tense, their limbs moving nervously as if expecting an explosion at any second. They had already contacted the council, warning that a human might die in minutes. Reports of human fragility were common across the galaxy, and many species assumed humans could be crushed, poisoned, or incapacitated easily. Ethan smiled faintly, knowing that none of it would happen. Laura moved closer to him and adjusted a scanner on his arm. "See," she said softly, "your body is neutralizing the compound. It's weak for a human. It's already starting to break down." Ethan nodded slightly, glancing at the monitors. Indeed, the graphs and numbers shifted quickly. The poison that should have been deadly was decreasing, its effect minimal. The alien medics looked at the numbers, then at Ethan, then back at the monitors. Confusion painted their faces. Senar cleared his throat and spoke cautiously. How is this possible?" he asked. Laura smiled faintly. "Humans evolved to handle poisons naturally. Plants, spoiled food, chemicals. Our bodies are resilient. What is lethal to you might be harmless to us." The other medics whispered quickly among themselves. Their voices were sharp and fast, a mixture of fear and disbelief. They had studied humans, but nothing in their texts explained this. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I know it looks strange," he said, his voice calm and steady, "but humans can survive things that would kill most of your species. We adapt quickly. Our bodies are made to process compounds that would be dangerous for others. It's just biology." The aliens' skin colors shifted again, a visual display of their emotions. Some looked angry, others frightened, and a few seemed fascinated. It was hard for them to accept that a human could shrug off poison so casually. The council representatives outside the med bay observed through the transparent walls. Whispers of concern and disbelief filled the corridor. One delegate turned to another. Our intelligence was wrong. Humans are stronger than we assumed. The other shook his head slowly. I have never seen anything like this. They should be dead. The first delegate nodded, still watching Ethan with wide eyes. Inside, Ethan stretched his legs slightly and leaned back in the chair again. Laura smiled at him. "You're going to be fine," she said. "Just stay calm. They don't understand humans yet. It's okay." Ethan nodded, appreciating her confidence. He trusted her. Humans had always relied on each other, on quick thinking and calm judgment. It was why they survived in situations like this. Senar turned to a younger alien medic. "Prepare the antidote anyway. If we miscalculate, it could be fatal. We cannot risk it." The younger medic nodded and began arranging vials, syringes, and compounds. Ethan raised an eyebrow. The human body had already processed most of the toxin. An injection would do nothing but confuse the medics further. He kept quiet, letting them make their mistakes. Sometimes patience was the best weapon. Outside the med bay, the delegates continued to whisper. Larian, the blue-skinned delegate, stared at the human calmly sipping water. He is not in danger," he muttered. His voice was low, almost a hiss. Other delegates shook their heads, still unwilling to accept it. "Our readings indicate a poison lethal to most species," one said. "How can he be alive?" Larian's skin brightened slightly, a mixture of shock and respect. "Perhaps we underestimated humans." Inside, Laura moved to the side and watched Ethan closely. She had seen humans handle poisons before, but it never failed to impress her how composed they remained. "Humans are resilient," she said softly. "We survive what others cannot." Ethan gave a small smile. "It's what we do," he said simply. "We adapt. We survive. We keep moving forward." The alien medics continued to work, carefully monitoring his vital signs, checking for any sudden changes. Their nervousness remained, though the data increasingly suggested nothing would happen. Senar's face showed a mixture of frustration and awe. He had trained for situations like this, yet humans defied every expectation. The Council would later note this as an example of human unpredictability. Ethan finally set the cup down and stood slowly. "I'm feeling fine," he said casually. "Really." No need for drama. The medics froze, unsure if he was joking. They had expected a collapse, seizures, or severe distress. None of that had come. Laura smiled, shaking her head. "See," she said. "He's fine. Humans are strange, but they survive everything." Senar finally spoke, his voice low. "This is extraordinary. The toxin should have incapacitated him within minutes. Instead," he trailed off, looking at Ethan carefully. "He is unaffected." Ethan shrugged slightly. "We survive," he said again. "Sometimes that's all it takes." The room fell quiet for a moment. The aliens outside the doors were still whispering, some staring in disbelief, others nodding slowly as they came to understand the truth. Humans were underestimated at every turn. They were fragile in appearance, yes, but inside they were remarkably resilient. Ethan Cole, sitting calmly, had proven this once again. Laura moved closer and checked the monitors one last time. "You're safe," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Good. Now let's get back to work." He had no intention of letting this incident distract him from his duties. Humans adapted, humans survived, and humans did not allow fear to control their actions. As the medics began to relax, Ethan glanced at them with a faint smile. He had survived the poison, just as humans always did. The Council and the delegates outside would learn that humans were not simply fragile creatures. They were unpredictable, resilient, and quietly dangerous. In a galaxy that underestimated them, humans like Ethan Cole reminded everyone why they should never be taken lightly. The story of the human who survived poison would spread quickly. Crew members, delegates, and medics alike would whisper about it for months. Humans were strange, yes, but they survived. They adapted. They thrived. Ethan drank water calmly, the chaos around him fading, and prepared to return to his duties. The medics and delegates had learned a lesson they would not forget. Humans might appear weak, but underneath, they were built to endure. Ethan Cole had shown them this truth in the most unexpected way, by simply sitting calmly, letting his body handle the poison and showing no fear. The galaxy was starting to realize that humans were more than they seemed, and as Ethan walked slowly toward the door of the med bay, Laura following him closely, the alien medics exchanged glances. Their respect, though reluctant, was growing. Humans were dangerous, not because of brute force, but because of survival, adaptation, and calm intelligence. Today, Ethan had reminded them of that. Ethan sat in the med bay chair for a moment longer, drinking slowly from the cup of station coffee Laura had brought him. The alien medics hovered nervously around him, their hands hovering over devices and syringes that were no longer necessary. Senar, the lead medic, kept muttering to himself, glancing at the monitors over and over, trying to understand how a human could survive a toxin that would have killed most species instantly. Ethan, on the other hand, looked perfectly calm. He had handled worse situations before, and he knew humans could endure things that aliens considered fatal. Laura smiled at him quietly. "You've got them completely confused," she said softly. Ethan gave a small nod. "Good," he said. Humans survived because they remained calm in dangerous situations. Fear slowed others, but it never slowed humans. The medics outside continued to whisper among themselves. Their voices were sharp, anxious, and full of disbelief. "How is this possible?" one said. "We've prepared antidotes, injections, everything. He should be in pain, struggling, anything." Ethan stood up slowly, brushing off the tension that had surrounded him. "I'm fine," he said casually, almost as if nothing had happened. The medics froze. They expected weakness, confusion, or at least some sign of distress. Instead, Ethan's movements were steady, his expression calm. The younger medics looked at each other, unsure if the readings were wrong or if humans were truly this unusual. "Dr. Senar," Laura said, stepping in front of Ethan, "he doesn't need treatment. It's already breaking down in his system. Humans are adapted for this. You don't have to interfere." Senar frowned, his hands gripping a console. "We cannot ignore protocol," he said quietly. "We have rules. If the human collapses, it will be our fault." Ethan smiled faintly. "He won't collapse," Laura said, glancing at him. "You just need to watch." Ethan walked slowly toward the exit of the med bay. The alien medics tensed immediately. "Wait," one of them said. "Do not move. Stay here for observation." Ethan turned his head slightly, his eyes calm and steady. "I'm fine," he said. "I just need some air." He continued walking, stepping past machines, monitors, and the medics who were frozen in disbelief. Every step was measured, controlled, human. Humans had learned to survive through focus and discipline. Nothing could break them down if they remained calm. Outside the med bay, the council representatives and delegates were waiting, their attention fixed on the doors. When Ethan appeared, standing tall and relaxed, their skin colors shifted rapidly in astonishment. Larian, the blue-skinned delegate, whispered to another, He is walking. He should be dying." The other delegate shook his head. "I do not understand." "Our sensors said lethal toxin. He should be incapacitated." Ethan noticed their confusion but said nothing. Humans rarely explained their biology to aliens. It was enough to survive, and let the galaxy figure the rest out. Ethan continued down the corridor, passing security officers who had rushed to guide him here. They looked at him with a mixture of awe and caution. No human had ever been expected to survive a lethal dose so casually. Whispers spread through the corridor, quick and low. Crew members stopped to watch the human walk, sip coffee, and ignore what everyone assumed would be fatal. Laura followed closely behind, glancing at the monitors that continued to report his vital signs. "He's completely fine," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "They're learning," he said quietly. Humans often surprised others. It was not arrogance. It was simple biology, training, and adaptability. In every corner of the galaxy, humans had survived dangers that aliens could not comprehend. This was no different. Senar and his team watched from the med bay doorway. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and respect. "He is unharmed," Senar muttered. "How can this be?" The younger medics whispered nervously, their hands trembling slightly. It was unprecedented. Every record, every simulation, and every protocol suggested the human should be incapacitated by now. Yet he walked steadily, calm, drinking coffee, completely unaffected. As Ethan approached a small lounge area, he paused and poured himself another cup of coffee. He held it in his hands, savoring the warmth, the faint bitter taste that reminded him of home. The delegates were still whispering and pointing, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. One of them, a purple-skinned being with long arms and narrow eyes, stepped forward. "He drinks coffee, now?" it asked, its voice trembling. Ethan looked at it calmly. "Yes," he said simply, "coffee helps. It is mild for humans, like a tiny toxin. Our bodies handle it." Larian's eyes widened, a mix of astonishment and respect. "Your species, you survive poisons." "Deliberately?" he asked, his voice low. Ethan shrugged. "We adapt, we survive. It's what humans do." The delegates whispered among themselves again, trying to understand. They had been taught to see humans as weak, fragile creatures. Now they were realizing they were wrong. Humans were dangerous, not because of strength, but because of endurance, calm, and unpredictability. Ethan sipped coffee again, and the whispers grew quieter. The delegates slowly realized that he would not collapse, that the poison had no effect. Larian took a careful step back, his skin flickering between dark and light shades in confusion. "This changes everything," he said. "Humans are not what we believed." Ethan smiled faintly. Humans rarely needed to make statements. Actions were enough. Survival was proof. Laura glanced at him and nodded. "They're finally seeing it," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "They will remember. Humans always survive." He took another sip, savoring the calm moment amidst chaos. Security officers and medics continued to watch, still tense, still unsure what would happen next. But Ethan remained steady. It was his nature. Humans were trained to endure, to remain calm under stress, to survive where others could not. The council representatives finally spoke. "Record this," one said quietly to another. "The humans survived a lethal toxin. We must study this. Our intelligence about humans is incomplete." Ethan overheard them but did not respond. He continued drinking coffee, casually moving through the lounge and looking around at the stunned faces. It was not the first time humans had surprised other species, and it would not be the last. As Ethan reached the seating area, he set his cup down and stretched lightly. The alien's expressions ranged from fear to awe. "How can he be unharmed?" one whispered. "This is impossible," said another. Ethan shook his head slightly. Humans were rarely understood. They did not need approval, explanation, or recognition. Their survival was enough. He had proven it once again. Laura moved beside him, keeping a careful eye on the monitors. "You've made quite an impression," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's nothing special, just human nature. We survive." The aliens shifted, slowly realizing that humans were far more resilient than they had believed. Fear of weakness was replaced with respect, a cautious recognition that humans were not to be underestimated. Ethan picked up his cup of coffee again. He took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through him. The medics relaxed slightly, though still cautious, and the delegates whispered among themselves, recording every detail. Humans were unpredictable. They endured what others could not. In every galaxy, humans had proven it, and Ethan Cole was just another example. He finished his coffee and set the cup down. Then, without haste, he stood and walked toward the exit of the lounge. The corridor beyond was filled with onlookers, station crew, medics, security, and delegates. They gave him space, their eyes wide, some whispering hurriedly. Ethan's calm presence was magnetic. Humans had a quiet strength that did not need demonstration. They survived by staying calm, acting logically and adapting to the unexpected. As he walked, whispers spread. He survived the poison. Humans are more dangerous than we thought. This is impossible. Ethan moved steadily, unfazed, toward the docking bay where his next assignment awaited. Laura followed him closely, ensuring that monitors continued to track his vitals. "You've shocked them all," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "They'll remember. Humans always survive." By the time Ethan reached the docking bay, his calm had begun to settle the nervous aliens. Some still whispered in disbelief, but many had begun to accept the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were adaptable, unpredictable, and impossible to underestimate. Ethan paused briefly, looked back at the med bay, and then continued toward his next task. He had survived the poison. He had walked calmly, drank coffee, and proven once again that humans endured what others could not. The story of the human walking calmly through danger, unaffected by poison, would spread quickly throughout the station. Crew members, delegates, and medics would talk about it for weeks. Ethan Cole had done nothing extraordinary by human standards, yet to the galaxy, it was a demonstration of quiet strength, resilience, and intelligence. Humans survived, not always through brute force, but through calm determination and adaptability. And as Ethan disappeared into the corridors, Laura following closely behind, the medics and delegates were left to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humans. Today, a simple human had walked through danger, and the galaxy had taken notice. Ethan walked down the station corridor, his steps calm and steady, while Laura followed closely behind him, carrying a small scanner to monitor his vitals. The med bay behind them was buzzing with quiet whispers. Alien medics and delegates could not stop talking about what they had just witnessed. How could a human survive a toxin that should have killed him? Their fear was giving way to something else, curiosity, and maybe even a little respect. Larian and the other delegates trailed at a distance, keeping their eyes on Ethan. They still did not fully understand what had happened. They had been trained to handle emergencies, poisonings, and medical crises, but humans had their own rules. Larian whispered to the purple-skinned delegate next to him. He was calm, not even nervous. "How is that possible?" The other shook his head. "I do not know. Our data says he should be incapacitated, yet he is unharmed." Ethan stopped briefly near a wide observation window that looked out into space. The stars shimmered faintly, and distant ships glided past. He took a deep breath, enjoying the calm moment before the council and delegates could overwhelm him with questions. Humans had a way of handling pressure, and this was no exception. He knew the aliens would try to understand, but he also knew that humans did not always explain themselves. Sometimes survival spoke louder than words. Laura stepped forward and tapped his arm lightly. "I should explain this to them," she said quietly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll listen?" Laura shrugged. "Maybe, but they need to understand why humans are like this. They need to stop underestimating us." Ethan nodded slightly. "Go ahead. I'll let them try to understand." They moved to a side chamber where the delegates had gathered. Larian and the others waited cautiously, their skin flickering in nervous patterns. They looked at Ethan, expecting some reaction, some sign of weakness, but he remained calm. Laura stepped forward. "You saw what happened," she began, her voice steady. "Humans have evolved to survive toxins and dangerous substances. Our bodies can process things that are fatal to other species. That drink, what you thought would kill him, was breaking down naturally in his system." The delegates murmured among themselves, trying to comprehend. Larian stepped closer. "But why? Why are humans different?" Laura looked at him calmly. "Because we had to be. On our home planet we faced dangers you cannot imagine. Plants that were poisonous, spoiled food, extreme climates, radiation. Humans survived by adapting. Our biology learned to process toxins, to fight infection, to endure situations other species could not. It's in our blood. It's in our bodies. Ethan took a slow sip from his cup of coffee and added, "Coffee itself is mildly toxic to some species. For us, it's nothing. We have built tolerance. Small toxins, chemicals, even poison, we can handle. It's how we survived as a species for thousands of years." The delegates shifted uneasily. Their preconceived ideas about humans as fragile creatures were breaking down with every word. Larian's skin flickered darker, a sign of disbelief. "So you are telling us that what we feared most, the poison, it was nothing?" Laura nodded. "For a human, yes. It was strong for your species, but our bodies are made differently. We can survive things you consider lethal. It is part of our evolution. Humans endure, humans survive, and sometimes humans even thrive in danger." One of the younger delegates, a green-skinned creature with a long tail, tilted his head. "You are telling us humans evolved to survive toxins?" "Deliberately," Ethan smiled faintly. "Not deliberately, it was necessary. If we did not survive poisons, spoiled food, infections, we would not have lived long enough to become a species at all. Survival shaped us. We did not choose it, it shaped us." The aliens looked at him with new eyes. They had feared humans as fragile beings. Now they were beginning to see humans as unpredictable, adaptable, and even dangerous, not because of strength, but because of endurance and intelligence. Humans survived by thinking, adapting, and staying calm under pressure. Ethan had just demonstrated this perfectly. Larian stepped forward slowly. "This changes everything," he admitted quietly. "We believed humans were weak, easy to control, fragile. We were wrong. Incredibly wrong." Ethan shrugged lightly. "We survive. Sometimes that is all it takes. The galaxy may not understand it at first, but humans endure. We always do." Laura glanced at the delegates and medics. "You have to remember," she said softly, "humans do not always survive through strength. Sometimes it is patience, calm, or adaptation. We observe danger, we endure it, and we move on. That is why this human walked through poison and is standing here, drinking coffee. It is not luck, it is biology, training, and evolution combined." Senar, the lead alien medic, had moved closer, observing carefully. His skin was darkening, a sign of deep thought. "We did not account for this," he admitted. "Every simulation, every test indicated failure. Yet he is unharmed. Humans are unpredictable." Ethan nodded. "Exactly, unpredictable. You cannot assume weakness just because we look fragile. Humans are subtle, intelligent, and capable of enduring things others cannot imagine." The delegates whispered quietly among themselves. They were reassessing everything they knew about humans. The fear of fragility was giving way to a cautious respect. Humans were no longer weak. They were dangerous in ways that other species did not understand. Their resilience was invisible until tested, but once proven, it could not be denied. Ethan glanced at Larian and the other delegates. "This is not an isolated case," he said. "Humans survive harsh planets, toxic environments, extreme weather, and chemical hazards. We endure what others cannot. The poison you tried to use, it was strong, yes, but humans are stronger in ways you cannot see. Our survival depends on observation, adaptation, and calm." Larian's skin flickered lighter, showing a mixture of fear and awe. "We underestimated humans," he admitted. "We assumed fragility. We assumed weakness. We see now that we were wrong. Humans are remarkable." Ethan smiled faintly. "Remarkable, yes, but we do not need your approval. We survive because we must. That is enough." Laura watched him, smiling quietly. Humans rarely needed to boast. Their survival was proof enough. The aliens, however, were struggling to adjust. Their expectations had been shattered. They had believed humans were weak, easy to manipulate, and fragile. Now they were beginning to understand that humans were subtle, resilient, and unpredictable. One of the younger medics asked softly, "But how? How do humans survive so consistently?" Ethan looked at her calmly. We do not always survive. But when we do, it is because we remain calm, we adapt, and we observe danger before it overwhelms us. We do not panic, we think. We endure, and that combination, calm thought, adaptation, is our strength. Larian nodded slowly. Your species is not as simple as we believed. Humans, you survive in ways we cannot predict. That is a dangerous power. Ethan shrugged lightly. It is not dangerous to us. It is necessary. The galaxy may not understand it, but humans will endure, always. The delegates continued to whisper, recording everything, adjusting their reports and perceptions. Humans were no longer fragile. Humans were adaptive, intelligent, and unpredictable. Ethan had demonstrated this not by fighting, not by strength, but by surviving calmly and demonstrating resilience. The lesson was clear: underestimate humans at your peril. Laura placed a hand lightly on Ethan's shoulder. You've made an impression, she said softly. Ethan nodded. They needed to see it. Humans survive. Humans endure. That is all they need to know. The delegates slowly began to step back, their expressions a mixture of respect and caution. Humans were not easy targets. Humans were not fragile. Humans were capable of enduring the impossible. Senar adjusted his devices carefully, looking at the monitors one last time. This is remarkable, he admitted quietly. The human's physiology, we underestimated it completely. We must study this. Humans are extraordinary. Ethan smiled faintly. You do not need to study it to know it. You only need to see it in action. Humans survive, that is enough. The delegates and medics fell quiet, the lesson sinking in. Humans were subtle, resilient, and unpredictable. They endured what others could not. Ethan Cole had proven this not through combat or strength, but through calm observation, patience, and adaptation. The galaxy had learned in one moment that humans were more than their fragile appearance. Ethan sipped coffee again, feeling the warmth spread through him. The room around him was buzzing quietly with discussion, whispers, and disbelief. Humans had survived another test, another attempt to underestimate them. They had endured where others would fail. Humans had survived toxins, threats, and fear, and they had done so calmly. As Ethan prepared to move on to his next duties, the delegates and medics slowly began to disperse. Whispers of respect and caution followed him. Humans were not weak. Humans were not predictable. Humans endured. The galaxy had seen it firsthand. Ethan Cole had simply walked, calmly sipped coffee, and survived. Yet in that simple act, he had demonstrated more power than anyone had expected. The story of the human who survived poison would travel quickly. Crew members, delegates, medics, and council members alike would share it in hushed voices. Humans were strange, yes, but they survived. They adapted. They endured. And in a galaxy that underestimated them, humans like Ethan Cole were quietly unstoppable. And as Ethan walked calmly through the station, Laura following close behind, he knew one thing. Humans endured not because they were strong, but because they adapted, observed, and stayed calm when everything else failed. The galaxy would remember this day. Humans were not to be underestimated. Ethan walked steadily through the corridors of the station, his steps calm, measured, and confident. The medics had returned to their work, quietly recording data and whispering to each other about the human who survived poison. Outside, delegates and council representatives lingered in small groups, discussing what they had just witnessed. Larian, the blue-skinned delegate, still had his eyes fixed on Ethan, a mixture of disbelief and respect in his expression. Humans, they were realizing, were not fragile. They were unpredictable, resilient, and quietly dangerous. As Ethan approached the docking bay, Laura walked beside him. "You've left a mark," she said softly. "The station will be talking about this for weeks." Ethan shrugged slightly. "They need to know humans survive, that is all. They will understand eventually." Laura nodded. Humans did not seek praise or recognition. Survival itself was enough proof of their strength. The docking bay was bustling with activity. Ships of many designs, shapes, and sizes floated in their positions, crews loading supplies, checking systems, and preparing for departure. Security officers gave Ethan a wide berth, still unsure how to handle a human who had just survived a lethal toxin calmly. Whispers spread among the crew, growing louder. "Did you see him?" one asked. "He drank coffee after being poisoned," another replied. Humans are strange and scary. Ethan stopped for a moment and glanced at a small panel showing the station's news feed. The event had already begun to circulate. Images of him sitting calmly in the med bay, sipping coffee while medics panicked, were shared among crews and delegates. The captions varied, but the message was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. Ethan smiled faintly. Humans rarely needed words to prove their strength. Survival spoke louder than any statement. Larian approached cautiously. "Ethan Cole," he said quietly, "your species, you survive what we thought impossible. How can this be?" Ethan looked at him calmly. "We survive because we must," he said simply. "We do not panic, we adapt. We endure, and sometimes coffee helps." Larian's skin flickered lightly, a sign of nervous acknowledgement. "I see now," he said softly. "Humans are remarkable." Ethan nodded slightly, accepting the statement as fact, not flattery. The council representatives moved closer, their faces serious. "Ethan Cole," one said, "we have never seen a human survive a poison like this. Your calmness, your endurance, it is extraordinary. We must record this for the archives." Ethan shrugged lightly. "Just remember it," he said. "Humans survive, that is enough." The representatives nodded, already making notes. The galaxy would remember this event, and humans would be quietly respected in ways that words could not fully describe. Security, officers, and medics began to relax, realizing the human was in no danger. Whispers turned into conversations, conversations into stories that would spread quickly. Crew members told each other what they had seen, emphasizing how calm Ethan had remained, how the poison had failed, and how humans could endure what other species could not. Humans were strange, yes, but they survived. They adapted. They endured. And that was enough to inspire awe across the station. Ethan moved toward a small cafe inside the station, ordering a fresh cup of coffee. Crew members and delegates watched quietly, some hesitating to approach, others simply observing. Ethan paid no attention to their reactions. Humans rarely needed approval. They survived because survival was necessary, not because recognition was required. He sipped slowly, savoring the bitter warmth, and let the moment settle around him. Laura followed, carrying a small tablet with readings from the med bay. "The council wants a full report," she said softly. "They are impressed and cautious." Ethan nodded. "Let them be cautious," he said. "Humans endure, caution is wise." Laura smiled. Humans often left others in awe without even trying. Survival itself was the statement. Outside the cafe, the delegates gathered in small groups, discussing humans with renewed caution. Larian spoke to the purple-skinned delegate. "We believed humans were fragile," he said. "We were wrong. They endure. They survive what we thought impossible. We must respect that." The other nodded slowly. "We underestimated them. Humans are unpredictable, dangerous in ways we cannot see." The whispers spread quickly, reaching other parts of the station. Humans were no longer weak. Humans were to be watched, respected, and, if possible, feared. Ethan finished his coffee and set the cup down carefully. He stood and stretched, moving calmly toward his next task. His calm demeanor left an impression. Humans survived through focus, patience, and observation. Not every species could match that, and many had failed to understand it. The galaxy would take notice, slowly but inevitably. Humans endured where others fell. As he walked, crew members whispered stories about the event. Some exaggerated details, but the essence remained the same. A human had survived poison, calmly walked through danger, and remained unaffected. His endurance had left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. Humans were subtle, resilient, and impossible to predict. The galaxy would remember this story. Ethan Cole had become part of that memory. Laura glanced at him. "People are already calling you a legend," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head slightly. "I'm not a legend," he said calmly. "Humans survive, that is enough." "The galaxy will remember it because it is true, not because of me," she nodded. Humans rarely needed recognition. Their actions spoke for themselves, and survival was always the proof. Larian followed at a distance, still observing. "Humans," he said softly to another delegate, "we believed them fragile. We were wrong. We must consider them carefully in every negotiation, every interaction. They endure what we cannot imagine. They survive. And that makes them dangerous." The other delegate nodded. Humans were not dangerous because of brute strength, but because they survived, adapted, and remained calm when others failed. Ethan moved to the station's command center next. Officers and crew gave him space, still whispering about what had happened. "Did you see the human walk out?" one officer asked. "He drank coffee after being poisoned," another replied. "Humans are strange and unstoppable." Ethan smiled faintly. Humans often left others astonished, not by force but by endurance. Survival was their quiet strength. The council requested a briefing, and Ethan attended without hesitation. He calmly described his observations and actions, though not in great detail. Humans rarely needed to explain fully. The outcome itself, survival, was the lesson. Delegates listened carefully, noting that humans could endure toxins, adapt to threats, and remain calm under pressure. The galaxy would take notice, slowly revising assumptions about humans and Deathworlders. As the council concluded, Larian approached Ethan quietly. "We have learned much today," he said softly. "Your species, it endures. It survives what we cannot. We will respect that." Ethan nodded faintly. "Respect is fine. Fear is unnecessary. Humans survive because we must, not because we seek recognition." Larian nodded slowly. Humans were unpredictable, adaptive, and enduring. They were not fragile. They were powerful in subtle ways that could not be measured by traditional standards. Outside the council chamber, whispers continued. Crew members, medics, and delegates shared stories of the event, each retelling emphasizing calm endurance, the failure of the poison, and Ethan drinking coffee without harm. Humans were strange, yes, but resilient beyond imagination. The galaxy was learning, slowly but surely, that humans were not to be underestimated. Ethan walked through the station calmly, Laura following, both aware of the attention they were attracting. Crew members stared, some cautiously, others with admiration. Humans survived. They endured. They adapted. And in a galaxy that often underestimated them, humans quietly left their mark, proving that survival was the ultimate demonstration of strength. As Ethan passed into the docking area to prepare for his next assignment, Larian whispered to another delegate, "We have underestimated humans. We believed them fragile. Now we see they endure. That endurance, that calm, it is dangerous." The other nodded. Humans were unpredictable, intelligent, and resilient. The galaxy would have to reconsider every assumption about them. Ethan stepped onto his shuttle, his calm demeanor unshaken. Laura secured the systems beside him, quietly noting the reactions from crews and delegates alike. Humans had survived another test, another attempt to underestimate them. They endured, they adapted, they survived, and they left the galaxy with a quiet, undeniable proof of their resilience. As the shuttle lifted from the station, Ethan looked out the observation window at the glittering stars. Humans would continue to endure, continue to survive, and continue to prove, quietly but undeniably, that they were a species not to be underestimated. The story of the human who survived poison and calmly walked with coffee would be told and retold, a quiet legend spreading across the galaxy. And Ethan Cole, human, Deathworlder survivor, walked calmly, carried no pride, sought no recognition, and drank his coffee. Humans endured, and that was enough.